Before I begin, I would like to thank my amazing advisor, Dr. Phillip Tran, for being my advisor on this project. So, imagine you're a marine scientist. You'll be spending tons of time out there in the field collecting all sorts of data, from photos to videos to spreadsheets. And this data is going to live on a variety of different mediums, such as external hard drives, flash drives, and even if your equipment is old enough, potentially even floppy disks. So here's the problem. You're going to be spending so much time in the field collecting all this data. You as an individual researcher on one trip could potentially create, what, hundreds if not thousands of files? Spread that across a whole research team on a single trip, that might be thousands, tens of thousands of files. And a research group over a decades-long career, you're probably up in the order of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of files. And before you know it, your files look something like this. So, of course, you could take the logical step and be really good and diligent and put everything into neat little folders. But that kind of has its own consequences as well. If you don't think really deeply about how you set up your folder structure, it can also become really difficult to find things. And if you have hundreds of thousands of files to track, you're not going to be able to exactly understand where things are. For example, if I'm trying to find all the data my lab has collected on clownfish in Australia from the years 2000 to 2010, that might require me to scour basically every hard drive in the lab, which is not a really good use of time. So the problem that marine biologists have is that they just simply have too much data, and there isn't really a good way to organize it right now. So Dr. Lobel and I went to the drawing board. What's really important for researchers when it comes to managing their data? We really identified three core things. First, being able to identify what files contained, two, categorize those files so they can find related files, and three, be able to quickly and easily search for the files that researchers need at any given moment. This is super important, especially for long-term research projects. And oftentimes, data doesn't actually become useful until years down the line when you're doing some sort of follow-up study. So it's important that you are able to find this data quickly and easily. The idea really is to build a search engine, but for all your research data. To that, we developed Marine Databaser, an application for efficiently and accurately filing and retrieving research data, in addition to doing some computation and processing as well. So the interesting thing about this is that there's no novel solutions out there that quite match the bill for marine biologists right now. They all suffer from, well, not being able to meet some of these key constraints here. So one of the first things that's very important is that the program must work on different platforms. A lot of marine biology programs right now are tied to either Mac or Windows, and it's not really great where you're being punished for owning the wrong computer. So definitely whatever we had to build had to work across different platforms. Also, because marine biologists spend tons of time out in the field where an internet connection really isn't a given, it had to work without an internet connection and also couldn't rely on any cloud computation. So everything had to be stored on device and all computations had to be done on device. And of course, because the organization is quite a crucial aspect, we also wanted to tie in some sort of computational aspect as well. So not only just being able to manage your data, but also process it somehow so that it can be used in third-party programs for analysis. And lastly, because tons of these marine biology applications end up either going out of date because the manufacturer or the producer doesn't think it's profitable anymore and they drop support, or maybe the company just goes out of business. We definitely wanted to avoid that. So to avoid that, we made everything open source. That means the code is freely available for anybody to modify and use as they please. So even if I'm not working on the project more actively, for example, there's always going to be some way to take over the project and continue it. So let's go on to the different features that this product provides. We kind of group things into three different categories for must-have, should-haves, and nice-to-haves. With the must-haves, these are things that all have to do with being able to identify what kind of data you have and be able to search really quickly and easily. So if you're aware of how hashtags work in Instagram, you can do like hashtag Australia and find all Instagram posts about Australia. That's what I did with file tagging. It allows you to use a succinct tag to identify what the file is about. And you can add multiple tags. So let's say I just came back from my research trip. I have all this data. I can tag every single file with clownfish Australia 2024. So when I come back and search for it, I can just search by tag and easily find that data once again. Next is the category of should-haves. So these are things that allow researchers to have a little bit more control over their data. Note-taking just allows you to identify what's so important about that file, but in a format that is more like doing a quick sticky note. So things that can't be succinctly summed up by a file tag, for example, maybe saying like, leave this file for John, this is really important for the thesis, something like that. Just any basic metadata that you want to attach to that file. And then also being able to import and export data. This basically allows you to make a backup of all your data. Let's say you're on a research trip and, well, your laptop fell off the ship. It's okay because you backed it off to external hard drive that's safe on deck. This also allows researchers to share the database with each other. And the nice to haves, this is the video and audio processing features I was talking about earlier. Being able to both splice videos, so that means take a longer video and cut it down into smaller segments for video analysis and audio analysis. And then, of course, also taking a video and extracting just the audio from it, and then throwing that audio into a third-party analysis program. So let's just go over what the interface looks like here. This is the interface used for managing the files. So this is more the cataloging side of things, being able to manage file tags, notes, as well as being able to search for something. So here I'm actually doing a search query right now where I am looking for anything with a tag of Australia that is a video, and I'm searching for Daxillus in particular. And let's move on to the other features. So this is the extract audio interface. Here I'm extracting the audio from 4 different videos, and it allows me to extract it in a format that is widely compatible with different third-party analysis tools. And lastly, this is the interface for splicing a video. So this allows you to create from a larger video, create a lot of smaller video clips. On the left is the video itself, and on the right is the audio represented in 2 different ways, an audio spectrogram and an audio waveform. So this allows you to quickly and easily line up both what you're seeing visually and what you're hearing auditorily so that you're able to make a more accurate splice region. So with a tool like this, I really wanted 3 pillars to be emphasized. First, the discovery aspect, being able to reduce the time and effort needed to find and compile data. And then from there, being able to identify data quickly and easily. So researchers often lose a lot of time by trying to find the data that they've created previously, or perhaps even completely misplaced. So preventing that from happening entirely is super great. And lastly is dissemination through the import and exporting database features, but also through the video splicing feature, as I said before, and the audio conversion stuff. So although this tool is purpose-built for marine biologists, it's my hope that any discipline that needs to handle large amounts of data and process audio and video can take advantage of this. Thank you so much for attending my presentation, and I'll open up to questions.
Thank you, Philip. You did a great job convincing us of how amazingly this all came together. I'm just curious to hear maybe what was the hardest part about this, either from a technical standpoint or conceptual one?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the hardest part of this was figuring out how any of the pieces would come together. I knew I had to make something that didn't rely on the internet at all and had to work completely on a computer. Meanwhile, the only programming experience I've had is the opposite, which is cloud-enabled web services. But the great thing about that, if I go back in my slides a little, is there is technology out there that allows you to use basically technology that you would use to build web applications, but make it all run locally. I use something called the Electron framework to do that. So I can use all the familiar tools and tooling that I can, and thus just interface with a local computer instead of a remote server. But that was definitely a challenge for me.
Thank you, Philip. Nice work. I wonder, are you planning, or you think, you envision that this will be extended to other areas of research where, for example, not only we need images, video, and sound, but also, say, like code or a PDF of a paper, and relate, what was the video clip acquired by, say, running a piece of code, right?
Yeah, I would love to have something like that. And the beauty of this being open source is that other people can also contribute to this. And I guess I haven't really discussed this yet, but I would really like to talk to Spark and other organizations at BU to see if there's students interested in working on this as a project, because I think it has a very long lifespan outside of just something that I'm doing as a Kilachand project.
Thanks, Philip. I was just wondering if you could
tell us a little bit about the difference between what you describe in your, I'm looking at your abstract, the traditional way of organizing research, folders, subfolders, etc., and what you are moving to in terms of thinking about research with a platform like this.
Gotcha. So let's do something really mundane, like, for example, something I do all the time is misplace PDF files and anything I download for school, right? You just throw it in a folder and hope you remember that it's there. With a model like this, instead of having to consciously remember how I set up my folders and where to navigate to find that file, I can simply use the tool itself to search for it. So think of it like using Google, for example, to find pictures of cats and dogs. You don't have to go to every website you consciously know and scour through the web to find those pictures. It'll just surface those results for you.
So again, great talk, Philip. As a scientist and a researcher who definitely has been confronted with this problem, could you just talk a little bit more in detail about how the tagging goes? It seems to me that everything hangs on the tags.
Yes, of course. So the way I envision tags being used is after you're done with, go ahead.
How do they get assigned?
Oh, how did they get assigned?
Right, so how do you know 20 years out that you're going to put all the tags that somebody's going to need in the future? Or can one go back later and add tags that we didn't realize that there were, I don't know, anemones in this photo, but now we know there are, and so we need them. And that's where it seems to me the utility comes from, is having this great variety of tags. Thanks.
Absolutely. So there are some automated tags that I've added, mostly identifying what type of file you're looking at. The other stuff is a great question to raise. I think I envision the tags being used after a research trip. You would just go through and tag everything that you have so that you have a good record of it. But definitely there could be instances where you miss something, and that's also, in an aspect, you're losing data as well. That's definitely good future work, and maybe integrating things like machine learning to automatically identify what's in a photo would be extremely helpful.
I think this is super cool, so I'm going to try to ask a question.
Go ahead.
So I think that, I guess it's similar to Professor Dora's question regarding this tagging thing. Like, how do you prevent this database from becoming, like, instead of a messy desktop, a messy database too, right? Because if you aren't intentional with how you use or apply those, like, tagging systems, you could just get, like, yep, you put them all in this one spot, but then, like, again, the organization of, like, what labels are being used or applied, and then therefore queried is still difficult. And then just like I don't know, how do you make a search thing not look for the exact things that you're searching, but be more broad? So for example, like if you type fish, like not exactly FISH, but like every kind of fish might pop up. I'm very curious as to that.
Yeah, I think something like that is great, and it does seem like you're shifting from one problem to another. Like, I think personally, creating file tags is a little bit easier on the human mind, since you can always go back and change that up, whereas something like the folder naming conventions is relatively rigid, right? If for all of a sudden you've named everything by like date and year, and you want to change it up and name everything by species, you have to change absolutely everything, right? But with file tags, they're much more free form. Again, yeah, there is definitely some discipline involved. If you just start naming things kind of all willy-nilly, it does become difficult. And like you said, with more of a fuzzy search, right? Right now, it's a little bit more on the user to add those tags. So for example, if I didn't tag any files with fish, they wouldn't naturally surface. But there's certainly ways that I can integrate at least maybe some sort of onboard machine learning perhaps, or that'd probably be a good extension project to automatically tag files and surface those things.
I think we can wrap up. Thank you so much, Phillip.
Yes.